Yep, we're doing the turbo on my N20 powered BMW 528. The rattle that you heard, that's the wastegate. It is a very common problem with these motors. It's a massive pain in the ass to do because you have to take the turbo out. We got to do it because it's very annoying to listen to. Let's get the turbo out, and then we're going to figure out the Eurotrash Motorsports way of getting a nice refurbished turbo in there for the least amount of money. I really don't want to do this. All right, well, here's the wastegate. All right, turbo's out. Next to impossible for me to actually film taking this thing off, but there are a couple of things that I want to talk about if you're going to tackle this job. First things first, this is not straightforward, okay? It's not the easiest thing you're going to do. If you've never done this before or you're having a hard time with basic maintenance, I would suggest not touching this. This is quite involved, very little space. Even if you had a lift, which I don't, so I'm doing this on the ramps, even if you had a lift, very little space to actually do a lot of this. So as far as jobs are concerned, this is a complicated one. Now that said, I had to do it because this is what my wastegate is doing. Lots of movement here. And frankly, I was sick and tired of this rattle in the car. I was not gonna pay the shop price for this. So in total, you're looking at about $1,500 to $2,000 for the turbo, depending on where you get it, whether it's new, rebuilt, or whatever. Then you're looking at probably anywhere between $2,000 and $3,000 for the actual labor. Like I said, it's quite involved. There's gonna be lots of spare parts you're gonna have to buy. So you're probably looking at about $5 grand just to get this done on your car. I was not gonna spend anywhere near close to that amount. So I'm doing it myself, just like every other time. Now, a few things you gotta pay attention to. As far as the process is concerned, overall, not the worst thing in the world. You have to support the engine. You have to remove the right side, the turbo side engine mount. You have to take off the downpipe. Obviously, everything is gonna be rusted there. You're gonna have to cut the clamps and you're probably gonna have to get new ones. And then you have to remove the turbo. The turbo itself is not horrible. The actual mounting hardware is pretty straightforward, comes right out. But you are gonna have issues with the lines. This turbo has oil and coolant, so you've got 4 lines in total. Oil feed, oil drain, coolant feed, coolant drain. The oil feed line, fairly straightforward, easy access to. That's this guy here. It comes in on the bottom of the turbo, right there. The oil drain is a bit of a problem because the design is very stupid. The line comes out of the turbo and then goes into the block, but at the place where it goes in the block, the BMW folks have also sandwiched in a plastic breather tube that goes into your intake ahead of the turbo. And they're holding the whole thing with a tiny size 6 or whatever bolt it is. So you've got an aluminum block, a plastic spacer, and a metal bracket all held in with this tiny little screw, and you have zero access to do anything with it. The problem with that bolt is you've got that plastic in the middle, so water can seep in through there and this thing will seize up. I've done a similar service on the N20 twice now. That bolt will very likely shear on you, and you are stuck with a very, very, very uncomfortable position to try and extract that now sheared bolt to try and replace it. On top of that, you cannot put any heat on this because there's plastic there. So if you heat the aluminum to try and avoid shearing the bolt, you're gonna melt the plastic, which opens up a whole other can of worms. Now this is the new line that comes in. This is the metal bracket I'm talking about. So you've got the bolt kind of coating in here. So lucky for us, you're able to remove the line from this clamp and just reuse a stock clamp and basically leave this whole piece intact in the block. Effectively, do not touch this. So what I've done is I've undone this clamp. I've pulled the line off of the fitting and I left the plastic with the bolt in place. Trust me, you do not want to attempt taking this out. I certainly wanted to use the new line in its entirety so I can put this in, new O-ring, but the headache that this will create if you shear that bolt is just not worth it. Okay, so that's the oil drain. On top of that, the coolant feed and drain lines are also a pain in the butt because they sit on the side of the turbo here, they feed into the block. You cannot remove the turbo without removing these lines up. And you cannot take the lines off the block, you have to remove them off the turbo first. You've got very little space in front, so you can imagine your tire is sitting in front of the turbo here. So you've got very little space here to work with this. The bolt is not a problem, but these things, and you can see it, rust up into the cartridge, okay? Not gonna be able to see this any closer, but this is all rusted up. So when you try to take them out, you're gonna have to use quite a lot of convincing to be able to extract them out. Now, if you're pulling this out so you can just fix this and you think you're gonna get away with $100, I highly recommend buying the installation kit, because to reuse these lines, I think you're just simply asking for trouble. Yes, you can buy the seals, but as you can tell, these lines are all rusted through. The cartridge itself is rusted through. So you're gonna have a hard time putting this back together in a nice clean manner, reusing the old cartridge and stuff like that. Because it's such a big job to pull the turbo out just for the wastegate, I figured the easiest thing to do is to basically replace the turbo. I did not want to spend $1,500 on a rebuilt unit just for that one wastegate. So what I did instead is I bought myself a new cartridge, basically a nice balanced assembly. As you can tell, everything is new, so I should have no issues using new lines and putting this back together. On top of that, you can buy yourself the entire installation kit, which comes with all new lines, all new seals, all new gaskets for probably about $300. So all in all, you can get this whole thing refurbished with all new lines, all new hardware for about $600, which is what we're gonna try to do today. The next thing to do is to actually split this up, fix the wastegate, and then put it back together with the new cartridge and the new hardware. Let's mark it up, let's take it apart, let's drill this out and actually fix it. Everything shears. Yeah, like I said, if you're hoping to reuse some of this stuff, I think you're gonna have a really hard time getting all of this cleaned out properly. Jesus. Wow. All right. All right, 3 pieces are apart. You're gonna have a really hard time reusing this should you choose to. Now, mind you, this has got 220,000 kilometers on it, so it's due for replacement anyways. The cool thing is you actually do have lock pins that will not allow you to install these sort of in the wrong way, okay? So there are 2 holes, one on the compressor housing, one on the turbine housing. Now, interesting enough, the lock pin on the turbine housing has actually rusted and has fallen through. So I'm gonna have to keep an eye on the hole on the other one and just align it up correctly. But other than that, yeah, it's gone. You cannot reuse that one. Now, obviously, a bunch of garbage came in here. This is now more or less done. So we got to clean both housings, fix the wastegate, and then just reassemble everything up. To fix the wastegate here, there's a few good videos online. I'm gonna link one of them below. The guy goes through a great explanation as to how this is done. Basically, what we got to do is mark the arm, undo this weld point, remove the wastegate, push out the bushing, press in the new bushing, weld back the point, and that's it. First things first, you want to mark the position of the gate. Next thing we're going to do, grind that off. And the wastegate comes right out the bottom. We can see here that it wasn't sealing all that well because you've got a lot of smoke coming off the side. So there we go. There's the wastegate. Now we've got the bushing to deal with. And the bushing has a little point here that has to be drilled out for us to be able to press it out. You can see here, this is where this little lock goes in and locks the bushing in place. So we have to drill that out before we can get the bushing out. Okay, wastegate is out, bushing is out. We can see the sort of play that we've got here. It's quite significant. I don't have a hydraulic press right now, so we're gonna have to hammer this down. Be careful. Obviously, we don't want to damage this as is, so I'm using a bolt to hammer on top, and we're gonna keep an eye on where the pin has to come out for this. Okay, quick weld job. That's about the best I'm gonna be able to do. It's not perfect, but it should do the trick. All right, quick cleanup of all the housings. We've got the cartridge ready to go. Gaskets, lines, all that sort of stuff. I already mentioned earlier that the oil and coolant lines are a little bit tricky to deal with. So when we're putting this back together, the oil feed and drain lines will go on the turbo, while the coolant feed and drain lines will go on the engine. And then they're gonna get fed into the side of the turbo and they're gonna get bolted in place. All right, so we're gonna leave these two aside for now. Let's assemble this up and put it back on the car. One thing you absolutely have to do with any turbo mounting on an engine is to prime it with oil. So before I go ahead and mount the oil feed line here, we're going to inject as much oil as possible so we can get the turbo primed. So when the car starts the first time, until oil pressure comes through, we're not going to seize the turbo and damage it. I'm going to mount the actual wastegate and the rest of the pipes once this is on the vehicle, because this makes installation a little bit easier. The next thing we do, we got to put the rings on the manifold. All right, the next thing to do is stop with the coolant. And I'm actually gonna go ahead and change the oil. I want everything starting up on nice, fresh, new oil with a new filter. And one thing to note, I got a new coolant tank because the car's been throwing a coolant level error pretty much since day one. And even though I replaced the sensor, the error didn't go away. Apparently this is a common failure for these ones. The float, which is integrated into the tank, is actually magnetic and it gets stuck. So it does not measure properly the level. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a new tank in the hopes of trying to resolve this. It's constantly beeping every time I start a car, and it's very, very annoying. While all the air is coming out of this, let's go ahead and change the oil. For this oil change, I'm going to switch over to Valvoline Restore and Protect. I plan to run 2 oil changes on this oil, and then perhaps switch back to, you know, the Euro spec stuff that I've been running, the 5W40. If the information that's available online is accurate, this is going to do a very good job of cleaning the inside of the motor. But I do want to run it on a short period of time, and I'm only going to limit it to 2 oil changes, probably about 2,000-3,000 kilometers each. I'll try and get through the winter with the first one, replace it right after, and then go with the second one. Moment of truth. Let's fire this up. All right, let's take a look at this. The reason I didn't put the cat back is because I wanted to see how the wastegate operates once everything is closed up. As you can tell, the wastegate itself is spinning freely, which means that it is not pushed against the housing, which means that it does not seal correctly. Now, that means that we have to tighten up the wastegate arm. There's no way around it. Now, in all fairness, I want to replace this. I looked online. I could not find a replacement unit for this anywhere. Some of the N20s are vacuum operated. Some of them are electronic. You can find the electronic version of the wastegate actuator, but I could not find a vacuum replacement. And the reason I wanted to replace it is because this is completely corroded, and I'm slightly afraid that if I loosen this up, we may actually cause more damage, but we don't have a choice. We have to shorten this arm. Now I have to maintain the correct orientation of the arm in respect to the actual actuator. I don't know if you can tell, but it's got a bit of a twist to it. So I'm gonna mark this line. And what we wanna do is we wanna tighten it up at least one turn, if not two, so they can come back to the same position, just slightly shorter. Oh, there we go. All right, that actually worked. So we're gonna have to undo the nut. The arm is positioned correctly, so we have to go 180. And that's 360. So we made a full rotation in. Now we could put this back and try it, or we can do one more rotation and really tighten it up. There we go. I think that'll probably do it. Let's lock it back up. Like that. Yeah, the turbo's working well. Wastegate is properly adjusted. So let's close off the 3-4 pipes I've taken off here. The biggest thing left to do is to do the cat at the bottom, new gasket, new clamp, and a new exhaust clamp. And we should be out of here in the next couple minutes. That's it for this one, folks. Not a very easy job, not something you can do unless you're very comfortable working on this engine. The car has to be in the air. You've got to reach in from underneath. Very tight. Takes a little bit of experience to be able to pull this off. If you are comfortable doing the job, it's not that bad once you pull the turbo out, and you can save yourself quite a few $1,000s if you're going to rebuild it yourself. The cartridge was only about 300 bucks from Auto. The entire installation package was another 300 with all the lines, the gaskets, everything else you may need. And the car right now is working great. The wastegate doesn't rattle anymore. The boost is steady. Everything works fantastic. It was nearly impossible to film while taking the turbo out. So if you have any questions about the process, do comment below and I'll be more than happy to answer. So that's it for this one. If you like what you see, click the thumbs up. If you want to see more, click subscribe, and I'm going to see you guys next time.